Welcome back to Untold Spooky Stories, the place where the internet's darkest secrets come to light. Tonight, you're about to dive into another chilling tale, one that was never meant to be heard. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself. Because once you start listening, there's no turning back. This is another terrifying journey into the unknown, and it begins now. It started with the first letter. I hadn't heard from David in years. We were close friends in college, but we lost touch after I moved away for work. He'd always been a bit reclusive, but I assumed that after I left, he simply fell off the radar. We never had a falling out, and I never heard of any trouble from him. So when the letter arrived, I was more confused than anything. It was postmarked from Hollow Creek, a small town a few hours away from where I now lived. The letter itself was old, the paper yellowed and crinkled as though it had been sitting in storage for a long time. I opened it carefully, expecting something from the past, maybe an old joke or a memory of a good time. But instead, the message was short, cryptic, and unsettling. They are watching. Don't trust the walls. Come to Hollow Creek. The handwriting was unmistakably David's, but the words didn't make any sense. What walls? Who was watching? And why was he asking me to come to Hollow Creek? I tried to dismiss it as a prank, maybe even some joke from one of my other friends who knew David, but the oddity of it lingered in my mind. A few days later, another letter arrived. This one was postmarked from the same place, but the contents were different. It was longer, more frantic. I don't know how long I have. They're always here, always watching. It's in the walls, in the floors, in the air. I can hear them. They're whispers. I don't think they'll let me leave. Please come. You're the only one who can stop it. The door in the woods. It's the only way out. I sat there, staring at the letter in disbelief. The writing seemed even more hurried, more panicked. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine as I read it over and over again. David had been odd at times, but this was something else. This was a real fear. The third letter came the following week. I remember the exact date, October 7th. I had been on edge all week, and this letter sent me into a panic. It was addressed to me in David's handwriting, but the envelope was wrong. It didn't have a return address, and it was sealed with a strange wax emblem, a symbol I didn't recognize. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was only a single sentence, written in David's familiar script. They're already here. That was it. No explanation. No more. But the feeling of dread that surged through me was overwhelming. Something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't just David who was in danger. The next day, I packed my things and drove to Hollow Creek. The town was small, eerie small. It sat in the middle of nowhere, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills. The houses were old, the roads narrow, and the air felt thick with something ancient. I drove past several decaying buildings that looked abandoned, but there was an odd stillness in the town. No one was walking the streets. No one was outside. I found David's house on the edge of town. It was a dilapidated Victorian-style home that seemed to be sinking into the earth. The windows were boarded up, the porch sagging, and the front yard overgrown with weeds. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. The silence was suffocating. I knocked again, harder this time, and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, as if protesting my intrusion. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and decay. The furniture was covered with white sheets, as if the house had been abandoned for years. But I knew David had been living here. He had to be. I called his name, my voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the house. No answer. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like nails against wood, coming from the basement. I froze. The air grew colder as I descended the stairs, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was down there was trying to escape. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a heavy wooden door, its edges covered in strange markings. It was locked, but the keyhole was wide open, as though the lock had rusted away long ago. I pushed the door open. Inside was a narrow, stone-walled room. The ceiling was low, the walls covered in symbols I couldn't recognize. And in the center of the room, on the floor, was David. He was lying on the ground, curled up into a ball, his body trembling violently. His clothes were torn, and his skin was pale, like he hadn't eaten or slept in days. I rushed to him, calling his name. He turned his head slowly, his eyes wide and unblinking. There was something wrong with them. His pupils were dilated, his eyes bloodshot, as though he had been awake for an eternity. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What happened?" I asked, my heart racing. "What's going on, David?" His lips quivered as he tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, his hand shot up and pointed to the wall behind me. I turned. There, carved into the stone wall, was a door. It wasn't a door in any traditional sense. It was more like a dark gash in the wall, with faint tendrils of smoke swirling around it. The air around it crackled, as if something was alive on the other side. I stepped back, but before I could say anything, David let out a strangled cry. "It's coming," he screamed. "It's in the walls. It's coming through." The room began to shake. The walls groaned, and I could hear something skittering, scratching, moving inside the walls. I turned to run, but as I did, I felt something grab my ankle, cold, slick fingers that clung to me like they were pulling me into the floor. David was screaming now, his voice breaking into a desperate wail as the walls seemed to close in on us. The door in the wall flared with a sickly glow, and I realized, too late, that whatever was on the other side had been waiting for me. I tried to break free, but the force pulling me down was too strong. The walls around me seemed to come alive, shifting and pulsing as I was dragged into the dark abyss of the floor. I never made it out of Hollow Creek, but sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment late at night, I hear scratching at the walls. I hear whispers, faint and far away, but unmistakable. And sometimes, I hear David's voice, calling to me from beyond the darkness. They're coming. They're already here. I moved into the house because it was cheap. That should have been my first warning. It was a big, old place just outside a dying town. The kind of house with creaky floorboards, brass doorknobs, and rooms that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. It came with furniture no one claimed and a coldness that no heater could push back. The realtor was quick to seal the deal. Too quick. She practically shoved the keys into my hand and drove off without even saying goodbye. I figured she was just eager to be rid of the place. For the first week, everything was fine. Quiet. Peaceful even. But I never went into the basement. I didn't need to. It was locked anyway. Big padlock. No key. I thought it was odd, but old houses come with quirks. I let it go, until I heard it. A low, dragging sound coming from below the floor. Like furniture scraping, or something breathing. At first I thought it was the pipes or some animal, but the sound kept happening, always around 2:12 a.m. Every single night. So I decided to break the lock. I'm not proud of how long it took me to gather the courage, but eventually curiosity won. I pried it open with a crowbar one night, heart pounding. The stairs down were narrow and steep, almost vertical. I expected dust, old paint cans, maybe a boiler. But what I found wasn't a basement. It was a corridor. Long stone walls. Damp. Flickering yellow light from bulbs that shouldn't have been working. I'd never seen a switch. I called out. My voice echoed like I was in a tunnel, not under a house. I should have turned around. But the corridor was pulling me in. After maybe 10 steps, I realized I wasn't alone. There were doors along the walls. Old metal, hospital-looking doors. Some were open. Inside one, I saw a child's bedroom, completely intact, toys and all. In another, an office. An exact replica of one I worked in 5 years ago. I ran. Back up the stairs. Slammed the basement door shut. Nailed it closed. But something followed me up. The next morning, I found wet footprints on the hallway floor. Small, bare feet, leading from the basement door to my bedroom. I moved out that afternoon, but the house wouldn't let me go. The truck died halfway out of town. My phone wouldn't work. I walked for hours until I saw the same road, leading back to the house. That night, I slept in the living room with a knife. At 2:12 a.m., the power died. The silence was unbearable. I felt the air shift, grow heavy, and then the door to the basement opened on its own. I hadn't touched it. The corridor was back. Only this time, I didn't see light. I saw eyes, dozens of them, watching, blinking. Some upside down, some too large, and something began crawling out. A shape like a man, but its bones were wrong. Too many joints. Skin like melted wax. It whispered my name. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It came closer. The knife in my hand turned hot and bent backward like it was made of rubber. Then the sun came up, and it was gone. I tried to burn the house down. I poured gasoline, lit a match. The flames touched the wood and died. Snuffed out, as if the house inhaled the fire and decided it didn't like the taste. And then I heard the voice again. Not from the basement. From the walls. You live here now. That was weeks ago. The lights still flicker every night. I've stopped trying to escape. The basement waits. Every day, I hear more doors opening down there. Sometimes I hear voices calling for help, voices that sound like me. Last night, the corridor reached the top of the stairs. It's not a basement anymore. It's a mouth, and it's hungry.